My name is Bo. Originally, I was
The first version that started there different.
kind of a rug a little bit. I just gave some time earlier this week. Because I heard a lot of people talking about chain abstraction all week, I decided to put together a last minute grant on chain abstraction. Normally, I get very technical talks. This talk is not here. Apologies, that's no problem. So a little bit about myself. My name is Bo. I'm a technical founder at Polymer. We're bringing IBC to hearing L2s as a node with Posits SDK and both system. So I think general sentiment that I've been hearing from a lot of folks is that chain abstraction will solve mass Web3 adoption. And I wanted to dig into that and understand better. Is this the case? Will better chain abstraction bring in mass user adoption? So I have a few statements. I'm going to go through them. We're going to review whether or not the statements make sense in the context of the real world. That's a limiting factor for widespread adoptions. The first statement that I've heard often is that users shouldn't need to know which chain they're on. And this is a very common notion. So I have a question for those in the audience. How many of you guys use one or more streaming services? How many of you guys use 2 or more, 3 or more, 4 or more, 5 or more? Yeah. I use some more personally because I watch anime, I watch sports, I watch a lot of random TV shows, maybe some like smaller TV shows, so I end up using a million apps. It's highly fragmented. And this fragmentation is actually very similar to the fragmentation on the blockchain side. A number of different users use multiple blockchains as well. But on the other hand, in streaming services, we have worldwide adoption of over 2.3 billion users estimated. This is a quarter of the world's population. Blockchain, however, has far less than that number. What does a chain abstracted UX look like in a streaming setting? If you whip out your cell phone and you ask Siri, play Guardians of the Galaxy, you'll see that it will take you to Apple TV. And then you're going to be asked to pay $20 in gas fees in order to buy the movie. And throughout this whole process, you are acutely aware of which application you're on. This fragmentation extends to other application categories as well. Ride-hailing applications also have the same level of fragmentation. We have ride-hailing applications that are tied to specific geographies. We have multiple ride-hailing applications per geography. I live in the US, and I generally pull out both Uber and Lyft, and I compare prices across both before manually selecting the best route. This is not so dissimilar from checking multiple chains to find the best price and liquidity for a particular token. Additionally, a lot of these applications can somewhat represent chains. If you think of them as chains, you can think of them as non-chain abstracted, and this fragmented UX has not stopped widespread adoption of ride-hailing applications. There's an estimated 300 million people that use ride-hailing applications globally. But this is not to say that there aren't examples of chain abstraction in the real world. In the East, or in Eastern countries, there are popular apps like WeChat and Grab that abstract over many internal applications. For example, WeChat has over 5 native applications and 3.7 million mini applications within its platform. Apps like WeChat or super apps like WeChat give us some insight into what a chain abstraction Web3 UX could look like in the future. Another statement that I've heard often is that users shouldn't need a wallet on every chain. But what does this wallet UX look like in real life? In real life, if you think about chains as countries now, you see that users have to have a wallet or an account or bank account in multiple chains or multiple countries in order to have local liquidity. If you don't have local liquidity when you're traveling, you will whip out your debit card and go to an ATM machine and take out cash via a cross-chain transfer for a fee. Additionally, you can whip out your credit card and use your credit card to pay for a good or service. In this case, the merchant provides gas payment sponsorship on behalf of the user. Or the merchant will up the price of the good service to include the cost of gas payments on behalf of the user. Another notion that I've heard is that users should be able to express an intent and have it magically fulfilled. On this point, I've included an intentional me. In a future, far distant future, where neural links enable humans sit in a wheelchair and are able to express intents and have it psychically and have them magically fulfilled, unfortunately, we're not in that future. The current world today looks quite complex for even the most mundane of tasks. For example, if I want to book a trip, I may start the process or start the user journey on an app like Instagram, where I'm inspired by some reels of a foreign, beautiful place, and then I follow that up by looking for flights, looking for a hotel, and then also planning activities. This may span multiple applications, and overall, this user journey and user flow is quite fragmented. Or I can express a user intent to book a trip to a travel agent. The travel agent then plans and books the entire trip for me. In this case, the user expressing their intents and preferences to the travel agent then becomes a solver. However, solving isn't free. Solving comes with a fee. And if you think about it, the increasingly complex the task is, the increasingly intelligent or autonomous the solver needs to be. And increasingly expensive the fees will be as well. And in a very macro and abstract sense, this is how the labor market works. So I hope you see more about these slides that perhaps chain abstraction isn't the limiting factor for widespread adoption. The real world is highly fragmented. Our applications living in the real world have not been limited in the number of users they've been able to reach. The problem from my perspective is that we need novel applications. I feel like we're stuck in a fortuitous cycle of copy and pasting existing DeFi applications from chain to chain with minimal modifications and minor changes in mechanism and gamification mechanism. The important issue to this is that there are only a certain number of users that actually want to be on chain every day, utilizing these on-chain DeFi applications. And a large number of those users are airdrop partners, liquidity miners, bots, and so on. And actually, if we increase chain abstraction UX, then we're only making the lives of these farmers, bots better versus real users, and this will get us the mainstream adoption. We need great tools to build great applications. And a great tool, from my perspective, is the Cosmos SDK. Many of the layer 2 frameworks on Ethereum are generalized frameworks for deploying a generalized EVM with minimal expressibility. And what I mean by this is, in order to express complex logic, you have to do custom work. The Cosmos SDK allows developers to have a suite of off-the-shelf modules and a framework around which you can inject your custom logic and make and have the expressibility that you need in a structured way. We built a framework at Polymer called Modular. Modular enables Cosmos SDK app rollups to be deployed on Ethereum. And the way it works is Modular sits in a sandwich between the OP stack and the Cosmos SDK, translating between Engine API and ADCI Polymer Labs. I talk a lot about chain abstraction and how chain abstraction is necessary to achieve widespread adoption and how the real world is highly fragmented. However, we have the opportunity to fundamentally rebuild how the world works. I think this opportunity is best viewed through the lens of imposability versus solver autonomy. And what I mean by this is, if you look at how fragmented the real world is, the requirements for the solver in terms of autonomy and intelligence were quite high, and oftentimes a human solver is required. However, with increasing composability, we can decrease these solver requirements. Solvers in Web3, on the other hand, are able to become simpler and have far less fees than their Web2 counterparts. But the core issue here is that Web3 applications have great composability on a single chain, but poor composability across chains. Polymer helps solve cross-chain composability by standardizing the calling interface between chains via IBC or inter-blockchain communication protocol. Interop is a fundamental building block for chain abstraction. chains need to be able to communicate safely and reliably to each other. In the diagram above, a number of polymer hubs connect to each other, establishing a mesh, creating an IBC electronic or standard IBC network between layer 2s and layer 3s on Ethereum. So while the architecture of these rollups on Ethereum will continue to diverge, IBC will remain a common thread across them. By increasing composability and decreasing solver requirements, we can build a world that has better UX for everyone and very low fees and cost to the user. Let's build towards a world where we have infinite connectivity and beyond. We have some links up there for Polymer and OpenX. Thank you.
Do you see any mention qualities and chain abstraction? Do you see any leading qualities of development are relating the chain abstractions? Do you see any involvement?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned in the talk, I think at the moment, because of the only major use cases within the system, chain abstraction doesn't actually benefit real users. Because I believe that the user numbers are quite inflated, and I think a lot of user numbers are not actually real users. These are industrial farmers. And you see that with the airdrop statistics of various protocols. You see these crazy usage numbers and this crazy drop-off numbers. So my suspicion is that just making their lives easy. We're going to have much better UX for airdrop farmers. Airdrop farmers will love to like full chain abstraction.
So not to leading quality.
I think in the long term, yes. I think in the long term, my side about like solver autonomy and composability. I think in the long term, once we actually have those novel applications and where we have like composability, that's when we can implement these very simple solvers. For example, if you needed a human to do booking on your behalf, maybe that be solved with an AI that doesn't need to cross the AGI line, or even the AI line. Maybe you can use a simpler algorithm where you can like have like some preferences that you can put into it, and it just like figures out some options for you, and that takes place in the travel agent. So I think it reduces developer overhead. It takes time and resources to train these AI models. So I think that's like kind of the future. I see the lines like this. I didn't talk about AI. I didn't talk about it. I think like AI is like a line going up. So it's like AI becomes smarter over time, and as composability increases as well, there's like an intersection point where they can have a very, very big UX for like the regular user, assuming that there's all sorts of novel applications on chain.
So you mentioned that you think the sort of the role of schedule is that type specific.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more? I don't know how technically you want to know, but a little bit more about how modular makes it easy to place in the heavy lifting of it makes it easier to develop something that specific.
Yeah, I'll give you one very specific example. So let's say you want to have a chain and you want to solve for congestion. Making a chain faster, increasing bandwidth or throughput will not make you realize that throughput will get filled up with blocks. At some point, the programmatic users will always be faster than the human users. So then the question is, how do I make it so that I have a guaranteed good user experience for the actual human user of my protocol? And maybe there you can say, well, on Ethereum, why don't we take the Cosmos SDK, we'll take Skip's block SDK, we'll take the world coin L2 or world chain. We'll flip the world chain L2 up to a memory pool lane within the Skip block SDK for humans. And we'll say that through this lane, only KYs or only like digitally identified humans will be able to access this lane at some rate limiting. Then they have the bot lane where like the pricing is something different. The human lane can be cheaper. And actually the bot lane can subsidize the cost of the human lane to the point where the human lane can be completely gas subsidized. So it's free for users, but you have to pay if you want to do meta or if you're actually profiting off the system.
So, do we need now a wallet for every chain?
I'm not convinced that we need a wallet for every chain. I think the existing like cross-chain like instance-based protocols may be able to solve that in the meantime. There's a lot of teams working on that. I actually think that the only reason people even need wallets in multiple chains is like they're using the same application. So they're kind of like, if you're using the same applications, you're leaving you're moving chains in order to farm mostly. So unless we have more like novel app specific rollups, maybe there's like a single wallet chain, maybe like a count chain. Like I think that's how it talks about keystore rollups on Ethereum. So maybe you have like a single like account chain, and then we have like, maybe with ICA or with keystore rollups, you have all these like sub accounts, and then you just do what you need to do. But my personal perspective wasn't to say that chain abstraction isn't needed at all. It was just to say that like that's not the limiting factor to widespread Web3 adoption.
I'm curious, how do you think about stablecoins? Because in my opinion, stablecoins are one of the the only killer apps that or use cases that we have right now, and they are obviously fragmented across different chains. And so, others, how do you think about that in terms of abstraction, just using stablecoins ever?
Yeah,
I think quality of stablecoins as well, but now plays a role as well in centralization and stuff.
yeah. For stablecoins, I'm not as worried about centralization. I think like if you will have a USDC of the world, maybe there's stablecoins that can't completely change in our financing scheme, but it's very hard to stop a bank run as we saw. I think about stablecoins from the perspective of one, is transferring between peers and peer transfers, and then two, offerings. So my understanding is that if this is have USDC with Circle, and Circle comes out in that, you can transfer peer to peer. So you can solve a GP problem that way, or maybe with some other USDC app. The other problem for the fall. You can use that money in the roll, whether that's through some bank card, whether that's through taking that money out. I'm not sure if people can offer grants for every single chain where Circle themselves will have an offering. Maybe Circle will like work with a bunch of partners to solve this problem. So maybe we might be solving a centralized front, or maybe we solve via offerings directly from blockchains. Then you do PNP across users, and then you have CCTP or Circle's blockchain transfer protocol between chains. And you put it off. I'm not sure what's going to ultimately happen, but I think you have to solve both of those problems.